So we kind of started macroeconomics last time, and we thought about the market system and the big economic problem by coming back to the forest and looking at the forest. We got all the little trees in there that we'll kind of dig into, but I try to kind of come back to this picture so that we remind ourselves of where we're at and hopefully where we're going as we start to get into details. So the economy is really about the households, the people over here. And we have this market-based system where we have some folks that organize themselves as businesses in their pursuit of happiness. And that works out pretty nice because they've got resources to sell them. Right? So these guys buy resources in the resource market, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And in return, they get paid wages, rents, profits, interest, all kinds of payments for those resources head back to the households in the resource market. The firms take those scarce resources, transform them into goods and services that we like, that we want. And so we have this consumer sovereignty idea in econ where the consumer is the king. So back in the day with the king and the queen owned everything, and nobody else had much of anything but the shirt on their back. And so in the market system, the people are at the top of the food chain, and the consumer is king, and they decide what they want by expressing their wants and desires to the businesses who just want to turn a buck. And so they don't, for the most part, our assumption anyway is, from the big picture, is they don't really care if they're making basketballs or diamonds or a burger and fries. They're out here to try to serve the customer, and if they serve them well, their payment is the profit back from what they've provided. Okay, so today I want to think more about all of those final goods and services. From this picture, what did we learn last time about why we focus in on the production of final goods and services in the economy? What else does that reflect? The standard of living to some degree. Why? What else is it in if we think about all the final goods and services, the dollar value of all final goods and services produced within the nation's boundaries over the course of the year, that's GDP, and it also equals what? There was a connection here that was important.
I mean, it tells you where you are in the business cycle too.
Okay, we measured over time for the business cycle. Up top is the dollar value of all final goods and services produced. Whatever goes up here in terms of dollars that are spent on final goods and services over the year, it's national income coming back down here. That's the circular flow of the economy. When we hopefully we're enlightened by the idea that if I borrow money, somebody gave it to me, there's no new money created. There's no wealth creation. There's no value creation, right? All we're doing is transferring from one person to the next. So where does income come from? It comes from the generation of things that we value. And that turns out to be, in the macro picture, the amount of dollars that are spent on those final goods and services is equal to the income earned from the resources that were put into place to make that stuff. Okay, so GDP had some problems though. So we missed out on illegal stuff. We missed out on washing dishes and mowing lawns. So GDP is not a perfect measure of society's welfare or well-being. But there's many models that say, well, it's a pretty good indicator, at least appears to be positively correlated, despite some other people's findings. It's certainly some mixed results, but I think economists have found that increasing income, increasing wealth, has led to happier people in general. As the kind of the recent research on happiness, subjective well-being research. So it certainly helps with material things such as eating and starvation. How much starvation goes on? True starvation, starving to death. I know we always say, I'm starving to death. But I mean really starving to death. How many people starved to death in the United States this last year? I'm totally guessing. By the way, I don't know this, so I'm not trying to put out a factual number. But I'm guessing it's a big old goose egg. 0. We don't have people starving to death. Why? Because we have enough money anyway to get food into people's tummies, for the most part. Is there people who go hungry at night? Absolutely. But do we have it? No. Right? So we've at least got some minimal things going on with having higher gross domestic product, higher GDP. All right, so a bigger problem that we have not addressed yet, because we haven't quite got that far, is our P's and Q's. So GDP was the dollar value of all final goods and services. I'm not going to rewrite the definition this time, but I want to do it a little differently. GDP is the dollar value of all final goods and services. So if we take the price of chicken times the quantity of chicken, that gives us the dollar value of chicken sold in the United States this last year. Plus the price of beer times the quantity of beer gives us the dollar value of beer sold this year. Plus the price of haircuts times the quantity of haircuts gives us the dollar value of haircuts. Plus the dollar value, or the price of good eye times the quantity of good eye. Or maybe I should do this to N. Sorry, let me change my erasers. Let me change this to N. Out to the millionth good or the zillionth good, or however we define it, the dollar value of all final goods and services produced within the nation's boundaries over the year. That's it. And I'm going to do a little math notation, which is why I wanted to clean that up. I equals 1 to N of PI times QI is kind of the cutesy math shortcut way of writing what I just did above. Right? So the sum of all the N goods in the economy, price times quantity, price times quantity, price times quantity. So that notation kind of comes in handy just so that we don't have to write so much stuff out. And we looked at the business cycle, was the last thing we did, which was a measurement of GDP over time. And GDP's up, GDP's down. We had the peak, recession, trough, expansion, the 4 phases of the business cycle. Hopefully, on average, we have economic growth so that the trend is increasing over time on average. Our incomes are growing. Now, if we look at this equation, how does GDP grow? Strictly looking at the equation, we're going to have our equation goggles on for a second. I just told you this is exactly how GDP is calculated. How does GDP get bigger if we were at this level of 1,000 in this time frame and now we're up to here? How did that happen? By looking at this equation, what's the only way that could have happened?
More things sold.
What's that?
More things sold.
More things sold. So Q is bigger. That's one way. Q gets bigger. How else? P gets bigger. Okay? Now, if Q gets smaller, but P gets bigger, is it possible for it to go up overall? Yes, right? So we've got this mixture of ups and downs that could go down. What we know for sure is if this goes up and this goes up, this for sure goes up. If this goes down and this goes down, we're for sure go down. But if this goes up and this goes down, it could go either way, depending on which effect is bigger. Right? Now, which one do we really care about for social welfare, for social well-being, for how happy we are?
Price.
Price? What makes you happy? We got a monster drinker here. Todd's a monster drinker. What'd you pay for this? $269. $269 gave you happiness? What makes you happy with this?
I'm awake.
You're awake. What did you have to do to get awake? Drink it. So is it the price of it that made you happy, or the drinking of it that made you happy?
Well, if I didn't have to pay like $350, so that made me pretty happy.
So when we think about our own bodily functions, at the end of the day, what gives you happiness, the P or the Q? The Q. In terms of society's well-being, now, an easier way to digest this that we'll get into is to say, and you kind of brought it up, let me just use easy numbers and say your monster drink was $2. What if it was $4? And you say, would you be happier or less happy? Well, would it make a difference if you had $100 in your wallet, is the real question. If you had $100 in your wallet and the price was $2, if I jack it up to $4, but I put $200 in your wallet, I give you $100 more, does that make you any worse off? No. So as long as the prices of all things, including your labor, if you're making $10 an hour or $20 an hour, it won't matter on the prices. So as long as prices move together, the prices of resources and the prices of final goods and services, if my income doubles and the prices of everything on the shelves at Walmart doubles, am I any worse off? No, I can buy the exact same amount of stuff I could before, right? So prices are kind of the veil of the economy. Prices convey important information. I'm not trying to discount prices. They're very important in a market system. That's how we measure relative worth. So what did this old Starbucks cost you this morning? $3.89. $3.89. All right, so we got $3.89. We got $2.89, did you say, or $2.69? So we got $3.89. And we got $2.69. Somebody got a calculator handy here? So this is the price of the Starbucks over the price of the Monster. Let's see what the importance of the pricing system did for us. 1.45. What is that? What's the interpretation of that number? Matt? Opportunity cost of what? So which way are we talking here? What 1.45? What for what? Monsters per Starbucks, right? So, Samantha, how many monsters did Samantha give up to get her Starbucks today? 1.45, right? So she gave up 1.45 monster drinks for every Starbucks that she did. So prices help us make choices of trade-offs because it shows us the relative value of these final goods and services. But at the end of the day, if we step back and think, what made you happy this year? It's the amount of Starbucks and Monsters that you had. So this is the variable that we really care about for social welfare. In other words, the easy thing to say is that if the quantity stays the same this year and next year, but prices go up, making this go up from 1,000 to 1,200, are we better off? No, not if we have the same amount of stuff. We want to focus in on the stuff. Here? No. So this is kind of using the notation we did before. This is dollars per Starbucks, and this is dollars per Monster. And if I have a fraction in the denominator, I multiply it times the numerator. The dollars cancel, it's Monster per Starbucks. And that's kind of the neat little trick that we have with relative prices. It converts money into goods, into what the trade for the good is. It's called the relative price. Okay, so we need to fix this. This is not good. We care about the quantities, not the prices. So for social well-being or welfare, remember that's not food stamps and I'm starving, it's just our well-being. For social welfare, we care about the quantity of stuff. We care about the quantity of stuff. Okay, so we're going to do a little example. We're going to have about maybe 8 columns, so leave yourself enough room. We're going to have about 8 columns of stuff. In fact, I'm going to just eliminate this so I can start at the top and give myself enough room. So we're going to do just a little example. So suppose we got the year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we've got the price of good 1. Maybe it's Starbucks, maybe it's Monster, but we're just going to call it the price of good 1 is $7 in year 1, $9 in year 2. Then it rises to 11, stays at 11, jumps up to 13, and stays at 13 in year 6. And the quantity of good 1 is 25, 20, 30, 35, 32, and 32. How quantity fluctuated. Now we're going to add another good. So we've got good 2 now. And good 2 is $20. And then it goes up to $22. Then 23, then 24, then jumps up to 26, and finally ends up at 30. The quantity of good 2 is at 20 for the first year, year 1. Then it jumps up to 25, then 27, then down to 24, back up to 27, and ends at 28. Okay, so now I want you guys to calculate GDP for each year. And I'm just going to go down the rows here. You guys are row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. And Sammy, you can be 1, too. As soon as you get an answer, your rows, I assigned you guys each just kind of went right down the rows. Tell me the answer you get, and we'll start double checking our work. Just somebody kind of yell it out what you get. I don't have this worked up ahead of time, by the way. I just made some new numbers up. So I'm relying on you. I should have some numbers by now. Come on, talk to me. 575 for one.
730 for a second.
Hold on, let me go to row two. 730.